Well, the Indianapolis Colts lost a very tightly contested game against the Houston Texans on Sunday. Definitely went down right to the wire for both these teams. And today, I want to talk about some players who stood out in good and bad ways. So I present to you the studs and duds from the Indianapolis Colts Week 1 game against Houston. Let's get to it. All right, we are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, like I mentioned already off the top, the Colts lost a very tightly contested game that went right down to the wire for both these teams. Obviously a big bummer the Colts weren't able to come out victorious, but it was a very good game regardless. And I think it's going to be a fun rivalry the next number of years between the Colts and the Texans, between C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson. So from an entertainment factor, it was a great game, but obviously not the result that Colts fans wanted. But I wanted to talk about some players who I think helped contribute positively and negatively to this game. And maybe not even just individual players, but maybe just certain areas of the team that I thought were studs or certain areas of the team that I thought were duds. I probably will point out a few players, and if there are any individual players that are worth mentioning, I will mention them as well. So we're going to get into that in just a second. But before we do that, just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by PrizePicks. Be sure to hop over to prizepicks.com today or use their mobile app. When you sign up, use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match. All right, guys, let's get right into this. And I think the player that we've all been buzzing about, I know I've been talking about a lot, you have to talk about quarterback Anthony Richardson. Now, I will say right off the top, when you look at the pure stats, specifically the completion percentage, you may come away not super impressed by Anthony Richardson, but I will say this, the fact that Richardson wasn't super accurate against the Houston Texans, while it definitely is something he's got to get better in, I mean, let's be honest, in that second half, Anthony Richardson was pretty much the only reason why you were in that game to begin with for the Colts, right? Because the defense couldn't stop anybody, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But Anthony Richardson and this offense, they really kept you in this game. And you do think, man, if you would have had one more opportunity, you do believe with how well AR was throwing the ball down the field, that the Colts had a really good chance to potentially go down and kick a game-winning field goal. But obviously didn't get that opportunity. But Anthony Richardson, I mean, he had 3 passes over 50 yards. That doesn't happen. I think, the top quarterbacks last year had 6 in their entire season last year. So, I mean, AR, definitely a guy that just has that major, major potential. I mean, I made a video about it, multiple videos about it at this point, talking about Anthony Richardson. And, really, realistically, this guy's essentially third and a half game that he played, right? So he didn't really have a lot last year with the injuries and stuff like that. But Anthony Richardson continues to impress, continues to show a lot of really exciting things for the Indianapolis Colts, and has you really excited about what the future holds for him. I mean, just some ridiculous throws from AR yesterday where you're like, man, only a handful of guys can make that throw. And even then, AR's one of the few that I think can realistically make the throws that he made yesterday down the field. Now, certainly, like I said, he's got to get better in the short to intermediate game. He's got to get better in the layups. But again, this is a kid that's extremely raw. This is a kid that we knew had accuracy concerns coming out of Florida, right? That's not a shock to anybody, right? But to me, I kind of look at it and I say, we know. It feels like there's guys you just kind of know when they have it and when they don't have it, right? And, Anthony Richardson, for all the flaws he had yesterday, wasn't his greatest performance. But, I mean, the dude still had 3 critical touchdowns in that game, 3 massive touchdowns in that game, 2 passing, 1 on the ground, that just make you think, man, this kid's dynamic. He may still be very raw, but he is so dynamic, when he's able to unload and truly unlock his potential. And you're like, if he can just get better at those smaller things, some more of the detail stuff, right? The short to intermediate game, all that kind of stuff, the timing, all that stuff. Like, he realistically can be a top 10, top 5 quarterback very quickly. Like, I really do believe that because he's got all the tools in the world to be one of the franchise premier faces of the league. Like, he really, really does. But he's just got to get better. And I think that'll just naturally come from, it playing more. I mean, that was the biggest thing for AR last year was just he didn't play a lot. And that was kind of the biggest thing is like, it's essentially his rookie season still, right? So I know a lot of people are kind of understand that, but I thought AR overall, he kept you in that game in the second half. And so while it may not look pretty completion percentage wise, you got to talk about Anthony Richardson and his heroics late in that game. I mean, just incredible, especially in that second half from Anthony Richardson. Let's continue on talking about the guy that was his primary target yesterday. You got to talk about Alec Pierce. I mean, we got to talk about Alec because he had a very good game for the Colts. And, it's kind of funny because so many people had written this kid off, like during the offseason. They said, man, he's going to be number 4. He's not going to see the field. And if you've watched this channel at all, we were not on that train at all. Even though the Colts had Adonai Mitchell, who they drafted this year, we still believed Alec Pierce would have a big role in this offense. And we saw it yesterday, 3 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown. Of course, he had that long 60-yarder that Anthony Richardson was just an insane throw. And, Alec Pierce is a kid that just goes down there and makes plays. And he had another one that obviously wasn't a touchdown, but it was a big play where Alec Pierce just went up between 2 defenders and made an incredible catch. So, I mean, this kid, for all the crap he's been given, at quarterback and all the crap he's received from other people, I mean, honestly, he played very, very well. And he is so, so dangerous. I mean, we seem to forget last year some of the clutch plays that Alec Pierce made, in later in games that really helped you win, set you up to win games, right? And Alec Pierce did it again in this game. I mean, multiple times where, he gave you life on offense and he kept you in the game by some of those plays that he made. So definitely an incredible job by Alec Pierce. And it definitely seems like that hard work that he put in this offseason is already paying off. I know he didn't have a lot of looks in the short to intermediate game, but it definitely seems like he's improving in his route running, which has kind of been his biggest flaw, his biggest, issue so far as a pro. But I mean, if you want to say he's a one-trick pony still, that's fine. But that trick is pretty darn good, isn't it? So Alec Pierce, definitely a kid you got to talk about, no doubt. Great to see him and AR continuing to build that chemistry. And, a big reason why everybody picked Alec Pierce to break out last year was because of that deep threat ability and the ability of Anthony Richardson to throw it down the field. So you're starting to see that come to fruition, which is definitely a great thing to see there. So definitely want to talk about Alec Pierce. And AR and AP, it's a pretty deadly combination. At least in week 1, it was really, really good. So that's definitely exciting to see. I'm excited to see how that, group, how those two really continue to mesh and grow together, and kind of how, you only need to throw him a couple jump balls per game, but he can make some incredible catches when you do that. So I think you got to dial up 3 or 4 each game for Alec Pierce because odds are he'll come down with a couple of them, and that could be honestly game-changing for the Colts. All right, let's continue on talking about some of the studs that I want to mention in this game. I mean, I think you got to point to the defensive line specifically. I'm going to be clear here. Specifically when it comes to getting after the quarterback, right? The Colts had 4 sacks on C.J. Stroud. They pressured him pretty early and often, and they made his life very, very tough, especially in that first half, right? Now, I would have liked to see them be a little bit more consistent in the second half. I will say that. They weren't perfect by any stretch, but they definitely did a lot better job on C.J. Stroud in this last game than they did in Week 18, that's for sure. So still want to see them get better, but I thought it was a positive step to build off of in week number 1 for, the Indianapolis Colts defensive line getting after him. So they definitely are studs to me, I got to talk about for sure. I wanted to throw Adonai Mitchell in there, even though he didn't really have much. He didn't have a catch yesterday, but he was torching guys. He was open. AR just missed him a couple times, right? And you think if AR had, a little bit better touch on a couple of those passes, we're probably talking about a Colts victory, honestly, right now. I mean, that's kind of how crazy it is because he had 2 plays where he had beat his guy and he was wide stinking open. So Adonai Mitchell definitely deserves some sort of mention there. But that really does it, I think, for some of the major, pros in this game, some of the major studs in this game. And obviously when there's a loss, there's probably going to be more duds than studs just naturally.
Guys, football season is right around the corner. Definitely got to make sure you're getting in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. You guys can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks, guys. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with any entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. I mean, guys, look, I'm looking at some of these entries here. And if you're an Indianapolis Colts fan like myself, which you probably are because you're on here right now, well, I'm just looking at some of these season numbers here. And some of the stuff for Anthony Richardson, I have to get in on. Guys, we have one right here where it's 7.5 on the season rushing touchdowns for Anthony Richardson. Folks, Anthony Richardson had 4 rushing touchdowns in just 10 quarters of football last season. What do you think he's going to do this year when he's actually healthy and fully capable of going? Now, obviously, they're playing into the fact that they think he might get injured. Anthony Richardson doesn't. That 7.5 is an easy more when you want to talk into that one, guys. So make sure you are getting in on the action of getting some of these numbers for Anthony Richardson and other Colts players as well. Remember, guys, be sure to download the Prize Picks app today and use the code BTJ for your first deposit match up to $100.
So I think the first and foremost thing you got to talk about when it comes to the duds, I praise the defensive line for getting after the quarterback, but the run defense was absolutely atrocious yesterday. Absolutely atrocious. I mean, the Colts currently sit as the worst run defense in the NFL, and for all the investment you have on that defensive line, that just frankly can't happen. And, Joe Mixon did whatever he wanted against this Colts defensive line, and really their linebackers, their front 7, completely got decimated by Houston. And, that's something that we haven't really seen, from Houston in the last couple of years, is that ability to run the ball on this Colts defense. I mean, this Colts defense has traditionally been pretty decent against the run, so it was very shocking to see them really get punched in the mouth all day long and not have any answers to it. And so I don't know what the solution is there, because the Colts do have some players who are really good at run defense, so it's kind of odd to see them completely, honestly, just be horrible, just terrible. I'm still honestly in shock. Like, how does that happen? How does that happen? But regardless of how it happened, the Colts got to figure that out soon. I mean, very soon. And then on the flip side, the Colts weren't able to run the ball. Like, their offensive line, while I think they were okay, like, you look at what Jonathan Taylor was not able to do yesterday. They weren't able to establish a run game, right? I mean, Jonathan Taylor only averaged 3 yards per carry in this game, and his longest rush was 7 yards. So, I mean, on both fronts, your line has to be a million times better moving forward. I mean, you can't be seriously investing that much into this group for them to put up a frankly pathetic performance like they did yesterday. You just can't afford for that to happen. And you think if this Colts defense and offensive line were halfway decent, it might be a whole different ballgame. It would have been a whole different ballgame. So it's just weird to see what was some perceived strengths really turning into some weaknesses yesterday and really hurting your football team. So you couldn't stop the run. You couldn't get the run going. It was just very odd in a lot of different ways. I don't really understand why the Colts weren't able to run the ball or stop the run at all. And frankly, I think that's why it opened up so many opportunities down the field for Houston, is because the Colts were trying to sell out to stop that run, and Houston could just take full advantage of it. And, when I kind of look at this defensive back room, I've had a little bit of time to chew on it a little bit. I still think it's a unit that is not good. I don't think it's very good at all. But I think for me, really my biggest issue was Jalen Jones in this game. I mean, Jalen Jones was awful in this game. He got targeted. We knew he was going to get targeted. I mean, he's the guy that everybody targeted last year. He did not, I don't think he made one single play. He maybe had one potential interception that, of course, he dropped. But other than that, every time he got targeted, Jalen Jones got beat. And it was like every time there was a first down, guess who it was against? It was Jalen Jones once again, right? And I understand, like, this kid is a 7th-round rookie last year, was able to give him some grace. I was willing to do that, I was like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, see how he looks here, in his second season. but it was just terrible from Jalen Jones. I mean, horrible, horrible, horrible. It was just so bad, right? And that's a big reason why, the Texans were able to really do whatever they wanted in that second half, against this Colts defense. Even in that first half, like when Houston scored, it was typically against Jalen Jones in some way. So I don't know what the Colts need to do. They need to bench him, but then again, do you really want Dallas Flowers out there? He's not much better. He's probably worse. Like, I don't know what they got to do at number 2 outside corner, but it just simply was not good enough by a long shot yesterday. I mean, seriously, it was bad for Jalen Jones. But I thought the rest of the pass defense was okay. It wasn't good, but I thought it was okay in this game. I mean, Nick Cross had a very big mental error that he just frankly didn't cover Stephon Diggs for some reason. Like, there were things like that. But, like, I mean, Houston had a couple, like, they had a big play down the field once, but, like, I didn't feel like Houston went insane on you this game. Like, some people thought, like, it's not like CJ Stroud went out there and, threw for 400 yards and had 5 touchdowns. I mean, it wasn't a good performance from the secondary. Don't get me wrong. I mean, CJ Stroud was still 24 of 32 for 234 and 2 touchdowns and no picks. But I just felt like primarily it was Jalen Jones about every single time. And that was the biggest issue for me, was just you just need to do something else at number 2 outside corner, because I just cannot sit there and watch Jalen Jones be lost in coverage or not even attempt to be in coverage. It was just bad. It was just really, really, really bad. And I think just Gus Bradley in general, I mean, just the way he runs his defense is infuriating. I mean, you don't send the blitz, you don't do anything, you try to rush 4, like, you just don't change up a lot, right? Gus Bradley doesn't. And I just think, honestly, that's his biggest flaws. He's just not willing to change. He's not willing to adapt. And I think, honestly, that's a sign of a really poor coordinator. And I think Gus Bradley is that, a very poor coordinator. He's stuck in his ways. He's not willing to grow, not willing to adapt. And we saw it again on Sunday, right? And it was just a big bummer. So, I mean, Gus Bradley, certainly not a great performance from him, specifically in the run game, but also sometimes in the passing game as well, which we know this. And I think if this continues, Gus Bradley's going to be out the door sooner rather than later. I think he's got to be, because it's been bad for 2 years now. But, guys, I think that about does it for studs and duds for me. I mean, nobody else really stood out when it came to it, really positively or negatively in this game. But, guys, that's what I think for studs and duds. I'm curious what you guys think on this. So let me know in the comments down below. But, guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.